Hey, it's Mark Bergin from the Browns Nation Station. The matchup for Super Bowl 55 is set between the Bucs and the Chiefs, but everyone in Cleveland knows there's only one team worth caring about. I want to tell the listeners about BrownsNationSwag.com. The site has all the latest and best fan gear to represent your team. Again, that's BrownsNationSwag.com. If you're watching the Browns Nation Station on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe to the show so you never miss another episode. All right, cue the music, and it's time to start the show and my conversation with Kevin Tuleta. Welcome to the Browns Nation Station. I'm your host, Mark Bergin, joined today by Kevin Tuleta. He is the host of the Dawgs of War podcast. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Mr. Bergin, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Kevin, the reason why I wanted to have you on the Browns Nation Station is to explain how you and your podcast co-host came about Tom Seipel's story, and that's where I want to begin tonight.
Absolutely. So my co-host, Rawley Davis, he stumbled upon a post on the Browns Reddit. I'm sure you're familiar with the Browns Reddit forum. Probably like a week before Christmas, I think it was, maybe a few days before Christmas. And it was a Browns fan announcing to the Reddit community that he had just been put on hospice care, only had a few weeks left to live at most, and that he really appreciated everyone, being a part of that Reddit community and talking back and forth with people for years. And that, his exact words were something along the lines of, I'll be up in heaven watching with Otto Graham. If you ever see an opposing team's field goal go wide, that's me blowing on it. So obviously a very touching and a very deep post to find on Reddit. We record our podcast Tuesday nights during the season. And so Rawley, my co-host, found that post on Tuesday, like in the afternoon, and then DM'd Tom and said, "Hey, saw your post. Would love to have you come on our podcast tonight." For some reason, God knows how, he was familiar with our podcast and had listened to it before. So he came on and we just talked Browns football for like an hour, and it was one of my favorite episodes ever. So that's how we found Tom Seipel, the legend himself.
So for the listeners who might not know, Tom Seipel, a lifelong Browns fan, a Columbus native, an Ohio State grad who now lives in Savannah, Georgia. And he has been battling kidney cancer since his initial diagnosis in November 2017, when he was working as a missionary in Nicaragua. But Kevin, what I wanted to ask you about is, like, at any point, did you or your podcast co-host Rawley be like, is this too good to be true? Because it's like, anything you read on the internet is true. You're on Reddit. At any point we were like, this sounds too good to be true. Did you have any skepticism at all?
It came together so quick. And that's actually a great question. So we went to the middle of the story is we went to the Browns game with Tom, the clincher against the Steelers. And Tom's a priest, a pastor. That's one of the things he was doing down in Nicaragua when he was down there as a missionary for 10 years. And after the game, we were sitting inside the stadium. It was just like 10 of us, his dad, his best friend, his best friend's dad, Rawley, myself, Szabo. He owns Szabo Apparel Co, his crew. We're all just sitting there, people were just kind of quiet. We were just so shocked at what we just saw. Like, the Browns had just clinched against the Steelers, and no one was really saying anything. And then Tom just looked up and goes, I know not everyone believes in God or a higher power, but after witnessing what just happened the last 48 hours, how could you not? And so that was his reasoning. And I was like, no argument. I mean, I believe in God, but no argument here. What came from an awesome idea, and then between Rawley and Szabo, getting a GoFundMe up and, getting Emily and Baker involved, it came together real quick. But there was literally not one hookup. There was a lot of hookups. There was not one hiccup at any point in the whole thing. It was absolutely incredible. And it was just such a privilege to be able just to witness his day of his wish of being able to come to Cleveland and see one more game.
At what point did it sink in that this is reality? This is going to be happening, because you get to watch the Week 17 game at FirstEnergy Stadium in Cleveland with Tom, his dad, his family, Emily Mayfield. You're in the box, And the Browns end their 18-year playoff drought against their bitter AFC North foe in the Pittsburgh Steelers. Like, at one point where you're just like, this is real life right now.
It was a mix between that onside kick and when Baker ran for that first down. It was, I blacked out, not because of alcohol at that point. I remember there's like a clear, like plexiglass part of the suite that like goes up to your waist. I remember, and this is, I'm just kind of in and out at this point. I was browning in and out because of just the stress and the panicking that just sets in as a Browns fan, as people listening. And, I was like on my knees, like hanging on to the thing, like watching from behind this plexiglass, like on the ground, like just people were just, because we've seen this script 1,000 times, and we say this on our podcast. It's nothing against the current players on this team. We have a great football team finally in Cleveland, or for the first time in a long time in Cleveland. So, and I feel, I just hope the players understand that when the city says, we just still like think we're going to lose, or there's still that feeling in our stomach, it's because the 20 years before this team got here, this current team, we've had our hearts ripped out time and time again. So just we've been conditioned to do that. But I would say, and even after the game ended, it just still wasn't, Emily ran up Mayfield and gave Tom the biggest hug. He just saw them clinch against the Steelers with his dad and his best friend. It was just, Rawley put it perfectly, my co-host. He said it was a Disney movie for Browns fans. And it literally is no better description than that.
That's awesome. That is fantastic. And again, that's why I wanted to talk to you tonight, because you and your podcast co-host were integral for those efforts and to get Tom to the game and to fulfill his wish. Was there anything that he or his dad told you about their efforts, about how just appreciative that they were of both you and Rawley and your efforts to get them there?
Well, I think that's a great question, because first of all, I take no credit for anything here. I was just lucky to be able to be a part of spreading the word and just witnessing it. This was Tom's time. This was Tom's weekend. This was Tom's thing. Everyone that was involved wanted the focus and still want the focus to be just on him. But there were a couple times, and even after, where, he said, thank you. But my hand to God, I've said right back, I say, no, thank you. Because I said this on our podcast. I've said it a few times elsewhere. The world has never needed the story of Tom Seipel more than right now. And for those of you that don't know it, I guess I can give the quick. He went to Ohio, born and raised in Columbus, like you already said, went to Ohio State, graduated. He went to someone at his church in Columbus said, hey, check out this mission trip I do down in Nicaragua. I think you'd like it. So he went down there for like a weekend or a week or something, just for, why the hell not? Let's do it. He saw kids literally eating and looking for food out of the garbage, and a lot of kids being abused, physically, sexually at home. And he said, I got to do something about this. So he gave up everything he had, all possessions, everything. And he moved to Nicaragua, where he became a missionary, a high school teacher, and a pastor for the next 10 years until he got diagnosed in 2017 and had to come back home for treatment. But so the reason why I say it, whenever he has said thank you, like I say no, like, and I thank you, Tom, is because it has changed me in many ways. The biggest one being, and I'm more guilty of this than anyone probably, we complain. Can we swear in here? We can
be yourself. Yeah. Absolutely.
We complain as a society. We complain about some of the dumbest shit there is.
Yeah.
When the Wi-Fi goes down, your Instagram post doesn't look as hot as you want it to, this and that. And then you look and you see a guy who said, you know what? I have an unbelievable life. I've been blessed with so much, but I see people that don't have it as well as I do. I'm going to go do something about it. Put his money where his mouth is. Went down there for 10 years, did incredible work, met his now wife. He has a daughter as well. And then he gets diagnosed with kidney cancer 3 years ago, and now he's on hospice. So it's literally like something out of a movie. I mean, it's just so inspiring to see a guy who, again, had a great life, great family, Not that that would make anyone want to or not want to go be a missionary. But he went down there, and for 10 years, he did, so many great things for so many kids down there and families, kept them safe. So that's just been the most inspiring thing, is to just look at a guy who, to this day, he posts on his Instagram update videos every day of, he's still smiling through it all. He's in, unbelievable pain and misery because of the cancer and the tumors and whatnot. But every day his message is just, look, I just want to spread love. If this can help, other people out there spread my message, great. And it has, like, mission success. His message has been reverberating. Is that a word? Reverberating all over the place, Cleveland and beyond. So it's been a privilege to watch.
And you see the role that sports can play even off the field, and how that transcends the X's and O's, who wins or loses. And you see what his story has done, and it's gone viral and everything. I know it's something we've written about on the brownsnation.com. And so as soon as I saw the connection, and I know that you've worked with my older brother in Chicago and everything too, it's just like, wait a second, it just goes to show you how small this world is, in the sense that the fact that you even played, had a hand. If you won't say it, I will for you, Kevin, that you played a hand in all of this. It's just incredible to me. And that's why we wanted to have you on tonight, just to talk about your experience with that. But I want to backtrack here and talk a little bit about your Browns fandom. How exactly did you become a Browns fan?
You're born into it. No one willingly chooses to be a Browns fan. So I'm born and raised in Cleveland on the West Side. My dad, my grandfather, everyone, born and raised in Cleveland. And so you're just brought up as a Browns fan. And that's just one of the most important things, is if you're from Cleveland, the sports teams are at or near at the very top, or very close to the very top of your interest and love back home.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One thing I love about your show too, Kevin, is your social media feeds are hilarious. How do you guys get the goofy ideas to post what you guys do? I've seen some of the social media videos where you'll take, like, say, a movie clip, and you'll put, different titles on each of the different characters. How do you and your co-hosts come about with the ideas for that? I was just hoping you'd be able to talk about some of that, just because it's absolutely hilarious.
So my co-host Rawley, he started the Instagram account Angry Browns Fans, directly following the 0-16 season. He is a movie junkie. He's very good at creating content. I don't have any access to his Instagram. Is like, it's related to the podcast, because obviously he's a co-host, but it's also it's its own separate monster too. And he's grown that thing to over 40,000 followers now. It's all out of his brain. I've never done one thing on that thing. That's 100% his doing. That started before the podcast. It'll probably go long after the podcast. So he just does all that. I don't know. He has, in terms of actually making it, I mean, his brain works differently than a lot of people. And this is something that I haven't told him before. But he's very, very good at social media. He's very good at the engagement side of things. And then we have a unpaid intern, Sebastian, who does a bunch of memes and videos for our Twitter account. So it's an absolute, it's so nice to be, now granted, again, it's, the Instagram is related, but still separate from the podcast in a way. But to have people that are just naturally good at that involved, it just is such a great perk, you could say.
100%. Shout out Sebastian, the intern, as well. That's fantastic. Showing love. Showing love to the intern and the hard work there.
He's the man.
The Browns have a big offseason upcoming, and I kind of wanted to leave this open-ended, and we can kind of hash out. But to start out, what do you think is the biggest thing that the Browns need to address this offseason before the start of the 2021 season?
Speed on the defensive side of the ball. Speed. We have so many great playmakers back there. The defense is obviously the weaker side of the ball for us, especially after last season. We don't have, they had their moments, they had their games, their days, but I think what the Chiefs game exposed, granted, I know we have guys that aren't healthy, they're opted out, and we still have hopefully Delpit and Greedy Williams coming back, but linebacker was an issue. We got to get more depth at safety. Ronnie can't do it all by himself, But I think at the end of the day, it's speed. We have to get speed back there.
I'm with you there. I think you got to pair someone opposite Myles Garrett because you
Yes.
build your house from the foundation. No, Olivier Vernon's going to be a free agent, but he's going to be coming off that season-ending injury as well.
Yeah.
So I honestly think too, and I've talked about this on other podcasts I've hosted, some of the premier pass rushers in the NFL now line up over the right tackle and not the left tackle. Reason being, you're constantly in the quarterback's face, and most quarterbacks in the league are right-handed. I'd consider maybe moving Myles Garrett across the line of scrimmage towards the other side, and then whoever you pair next to him, he can go up against the left tackle against a quarterback's blind side. But I think that they need to find a guy. I know, and even if they do re-sign Vernon on a sweetheart deal, I don't expect him to be back in a Browns uniform. You've got to be able to pair someone opposite Myles Garrett, and that would probably be where I start. But with that first-round draft pick, in my eyes, whoever the best defensive player is available, I go ahead and pick him. That's kind of my thought process.
100%. And another pass rusher next to Garrett has been also a recurring theme all year. And I agree with you 1,000%. And, with regards to lining up, 100% agree with you. It's something that a lot of teams do. Fortunately, in this very, very unique situation, with Myles being one of the best players on the planet, it doesn't matter where he lines up. So we have that luxury, which is kind of a once in a generation thing with someone like him, just an absolute freak. But yes, another pass rusher, a veteran, perhaps, obviously a veteran, would be a big boost for that's defensive side of the ball.
Yeah. I'm curious to see what the Browns do with the 26th pick in the 2021 draft. Later than they typically draft because, again, they hadn't made the playoffs in 18 seasons. So
that's what we said. That's what we said. We were talking about this on our podcast a week or two ago, is that I didn't know there was more than 5 picks in a round because the Browns have only had, picks 1 through 5 my entire life. So they're talking about the 26th pick. And I was like, wait a second, wait, new this year? So yeah, we have the 20s. Apparently there's a 26 pick that we have, and I'm looking forward to seeing what we get. And it better not be a wide receiver.
Well, we'll get to OBJ. I want to get to the rest of the defense. I think you bring up a great point. You get Del Pitt back, you get Greedy Williams back, so you get some guys on the back end. I know the back 7 was a bit of a struggle for the Browns. Again, I think it starts with the foundation. If you can get a front 4 that can rush the passer without having to rush to blitz any linebackers or defensive backs, and you can get to the quarterback with 4, you can drop 7 back. What an advantage that is. And it makes the back end look better, and it makes their jobs a lot easier. I wanted to ask you about Baker Mayfield, though, too. I'm of the notion, pick up his 5th-year option on his rookie deal for the 2022 season. That way you get a larger sample size if you want to commit that large dollar amount towards a long-term contract. Now, everyone's going to get caught up in the dollar amount if they do sign him to a long-term extension. Remember, it's the guaranteed money that's important because contracts aren't guaranteed in the NFL. Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot to unpack with that situation, and that's going to be talked about, as you know, nonstop. We are going to be so sick of talking about this in a month. I guarantee it.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, you know what? The thing with quarterbacks in these long-term deals is it gets more expensive every year you wait. So would I love for them to lock him up this offseason? Absolutely. Is picking up the 5th year mean that he's not our quarterback of the future? Absolutely not. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do. I firmly believe he's our guy. I don't see why, people throw out some of the dumbest reasons and just stupid things, but he took us to playoffs. We won a playoff game on the road. I don't know what else people want, but in terms of the big contract, I hope it's coming. I think it's coming. I have absolutely no knowledge or sources to back any of that up, but yeah, every year you wait, it just gets more expensive. So why not?
Let me play devil's advocate with you here, just for the sense of the conversation. I wonder what kind of financial impact the COVID-19 pandemic would have against future seasons, and that you're not generating the same revenue, and how that impacts a team's salary cap. So even if the salary cap doesn't change all that much, is that because you're borrowing against future seasons? You don't have as much money to spend and as much money to allocate. That is something I think could work in the Browns' favor in getting a better deal for the team, and that you don't have to allocate as much money towards him. I know what you're saying, though, in terms of every single season, though, what you see some of these monster deals that quarterbacks get, whether it's a Deshaun Watson or a Patrick Mahomes, what have you. And that's always been my argument with Baker Mayfield in favor of him, in that just completed his third season. He had 4 different head coaches. One was Freddie Kitchens, who would decide to run the ball on, say, a 4th and 8 or a 4th and 9, or put his offense back out on the field on a 4th and 16. I don't mean to relitigate the Freddie Kitchens era, but he wasn't even the worst coach. Hugh Jackson was even worse. So those were 2 of his coaches in the NFL. This is a thing that NFL fans need to understand. If you want to talk about bad quarterback play, you shouldn't just throw the guy under the bus. The first question that you should ask is, who's his coach or who's his offensive coordinator? Because that will tell you a lot more. And I credit Kevin Stefanski, guy who should be NFL head coach of the year, and his propensity to run the football, commit to the run. It sets up the play action. It sets up everything else. And you saw as the season went along, Baker played better and better as he got more comfortable with the season. The fact that he's not running for his life because his offensive line was upgraded in the offseason. And what that does with this Browns offense, I'm excited for what is in store for year 2, Baker Mayfield, Kevin Stefanski and company.
I can't disagree with anything, to come from one of the worst offensive lines to the best. The first offensive line in NFL history, I believe, that's ever been number 1 in the block and pass rush. With regards to, so the problem with things like fantasy football, Instagram, ESPN, everyone, well, I shouldn't say everyone, a high percentage of people think that if you're not Pat Mahomes, you're not a good quarterback. People don't think that if you're not doing the no-look passes or the backflips into the end zone, whatever, because he can do anything. So I'm just making shit up, of course. They're not a good quarterback. And they also think that if you're the number 1 draft pick, you're supposed to be the greatest quarterback that's ever lived. Also not true. What Baker had if not the best numbers after that Cincinnati game where OBJ got hurt than any other quarterback in the league. His QBR, his passing rate, I think was up top 5, for the rest of the year after that. The guy's no scrub. And like you already alluded to, or not said, he had like 20 coaches in his first 2 seasons here, right? He's on his 4th playbook. I have never been so excited. And this is the first time in my life, at least since the Browns came back in 99, to my knowledge, or at least for the first few years don't count, that we're not looking for a new coach, a new GM, and or a new GM and or a quarterback in the offseason. We have all 3 for the first time ever. Normally right now, if this was last year or any other year, you and I would be sitting here talking about who do we want to be GM, who can finally come in as the coach and turn this thing around, and who should we draft a quarterback. So it's just so refreshing and relieving to finally have that off our back, so to say. But I'm very excited to see what happens with year 2, with him having some continuity finally. And the other side of the ball having continuity as well with Woods coming back. So it's just, we've never had this before. I've never been able to be happy really before as a Browns fan, or excuse me, hopeful. As hopeful as we are right now with an actual reason and proof to be hopeful.
Kevin, it sounds like you're relieved that you don't have to submit an application for one of these job vacancies with the Browns organization.
After we've had 400 coaches, 900 quarterbacks in the last 20 years, it was hilarious. You see people would actually be literally putting up the joke ads in job postings on like Craigslist or Indeed. And it wasn't even a surprise at that point. It was like, hey, we'll take anyone at this point. We've tried everything. There's got to be something. But praise the Lord that we found Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry and that they get along. It's just the greatest match we've ever had so far, knock on wood. And I'm very excited for, again, year 2. And I'm very, very excited for another Andrew Berry draft in a few months.
Yeah, it's like you said, knock on wood. And it's nice to see the Browns work in synergy with adults from the top down. And it goes from ownership GM, head coach, what have you. And with Mayfield, again, really excited to see what he can do in year 2. And I always say this, if he's not your guy, who you bringing in? What's your alternative? Because I haven't heard a situation from anyone saying, yeah, that would be a tangible difference of someone realistically who you could bring in to help lead this team. And I don't know if you heard this on the Dawgs of War podcast at all, Kevin, but we had people on the Browns Nation station reaching out to us when Mayfield was struggling. And I know they had that 3-game stretch where the weather was brutal in Cleveland of, oh, they got to bring in the backup Keenum. Keenum had success with Stefanski for 1 season in 2017. And it's like, let's look at Case Keenum's track record. He's 32 years old. He's on his 6th different NFL team in 9 seasons. He's the definition of a journeyman. You have to see what you have in your number 1 overall pick as an asset in Baker Mayfield if he's good, healthy, and ready to go. And I'm excited to see what he can do in year 2 after taking the Browns to the playoffs for the first time in more than a decade, really a generation's worth of fans.
I was at one of those Hurricane games. I was at the Raiders game, and it got to a point, we were up top somewhere. It got to a point where it was hailing and blowing. The wind was blowing so hard. You could barely stand up out of your seat, nonetheless throw a damn football. I mean, all that, we just started laughing hysterically because it was literally like being in a movie. That's how bad the weather was. And again, to the credit of Stefanski and Barry and Baker, and finally having a team that likes each other and likes their coaches and management, the bye week was the week after the Raiders game. They sat down, had a little kumbaya, and Stefanski and Baker just had a very open heart-to-heart, like, Stefanski was like, Baker's like, here's what I want to do. Here's what I'm comfortable with. Stefanski gave his opinion. They hashed it out. And the back end of the season, you saw, I mean, he had an unbelievable second half of the year. And they go back to that conversation a lot. They say that bye week convo changed a lot of things.
My argument too was that if you had put Keenum in any of those games to that point, he wasn't the difference between winning and losing, the losses that they had at that point in the season as well. A lot of
I'm sorry to answer your question.
Go ahead.
So I'm sorry to interrupt. To answer your question, we heard a little bit of that, not so much, because we did our best to drown that out. And anyone that actually seriously tried to come at us with that opinion or argument, I just said, all right, well, you got a better idea? Like, what are you talking about? I don't know what. There's not enough wrong here to be throwing in case. Like, this is where, the problem with some people, and these are the people that's just started following me again this year because they realized we had a good football team. Cleveland is not a bandwagon city. Cleveland is ride or die. But for the few people that did hop off and then hop back on, those are the people that are saying, or that were saying, throw Keenum in, because they don't have a clue what's going on.
I'm with you there. So, Kevin, what do you do then with OBJ headed into 2021? Because he's under contract through the 2023 season.
I don't know. I don't really put a lot of validity. I mean, yes, obviously, ball don't lie. Numbers don't lie. Baker had an unbelievable rest of the season, and OBJ. You can't say that's a direct correlation or direct reason. Now, I go back and forth, okay? OBJ is, when healthy, and, his ceiling is the best receiver on the planet. I think he's, when healthy, a top, I didn't want to say top 50, top 20, top 10 athlete on the planet. He's just an absolute freak. I'm not breaking any news. This is everyone can agree, hopefully agree to this, or at least majority of people agree to that. You look at games like Kansas City where we don't have the speed. We couldn't break that top off that he would have helped do in a game like that. So you look at, sometimes it's like people are like, oh, well, Baker's throwing so well without him. But then you look at Kansas City, you're like, wow, OBJ could have maybe helped us out a lot here. Throwing in, again, when healthy, one of the best athletes, one of the best receivers on the planet. Andrew Berry was asked the same thing. Now, I'm not guaranteeing OBJ is going to be here next year. I don't know. He's got a pretty big contract coming off an injury. I know Stefanski said he's excited to have him back, so hopefully he's coming back. At least try one more year. Give him one more year, that we can talk about it. But Andrew Berry in his, I think it was his bye week press conference, his State of the Union, someone asked him that same question, and he goes, I'm not answering that question anymore to you guys. Like, stop asking me. Like, why would I ever want to give up one of the best players in the NFL? This nonsense about Baker being better without him is just talk, yada, yada, yada. So to answer your question, I honestly go back and forth with this every single day. I don't know. I can't decide. Part of me, a lot of me, most of me wants just to let's start the season with him. Why not? Like, again, he's an incredible football player, athlete. Let's try it out. Again, Baker, it took him a brand new playbook, brand new coach. He really started vibing, the back half of the year. Throw OBJ in. Let's see what happens. Like, what do we have to lose? Absolutely nothing. So my long-winded answer to that is I hope he's around. I hope we try at least one more season. If it works, hell yeah. If not, it's not going to be anything. It's like no one's anti-OBJ or no one, it doesn't like OBJ. It's just maybe it's not a good match. We'll have to see, though.
I think it really depends on what the Browns could get for OBJ in return value. Certainly don't think that he's on an open market value worth, say, a first-round pick. And so if you can't get that if you can't fetch a good return for him, he'll be back on the roster and he can help this Browns offense. But the concern I have is if the Browns struggle out of the gate, who's going to be the scapegoat? And people will point to, well, OBJ's back and this team was rolling without him. And I'm telling you, I hate to say narrative but that's what the narrative will be with the national media and pundits all over the league if and when that happens. I'm telling you right now.
You're absolutely 1,000% correct. That will dominate. That will be the headlines if we come out slow out of the gate next year. And a lot of it will be perpetuated by a lot of our own Browns beat writers who we can have a whole other episode on them, but you're right. I didn't even think about that till you said that, but you are spot on. Absolutely correct. He will be the scapegoat if we come out slow next season.
You heard it here first. Kevin, as we start to wrap up here on the Browns Nation station, you got to imagine that the Browns will have pretty good odds to win the AFC North headed into the 2021 season. Now you got Baltimore still doing their thing. And I know the Ravens haven't had the playoff success that they would have liked under Lamar Jackson, also still a young quarterback. I'll leave you with this. I think Baker Mayfield long-term set for better long-term success than Lamar Jackson, just for what we know in this league at the quarterback position of what it takes to have postseason success. It's not to take anything away from Lamar Jackson, a guy who's won an MVP, but this has now been 2 seasons. And I know he finally got the win over the Titans. He only scored 20 points against a bad Titans defense this season. The way that the Browns are trending, Joe Burrow might be back for the Bengals. And then Pittsburgh's really struggling. And Big Ben looks like it'll probably be his last go-round, his last season. I like the way that the Browns are trending right now. But what would you give the odds of Cleveland winning the division in 2021?
So one of the most Browns things ever is that we finally get our guy and our coach, and the rest of the division has a bunch of free quarterbacks as well. So that's, first of all, that's just the most Browns thing ever, is that finally we have a great quarterback and we have to go up against the league MVP twice a year. We have to go up against Burrow, who looks to be as advertised twice a year. Hope he comes back healthy. Big Ben is obviously ragdolled us for many, many years, but I think we have the thing that the only thing that has me not almost confident in winning the division next year is we drafted Grant Delpit because of Lamar Jackson. That's why you draft guys like that, because of the freak athlete Lamar is. So until we kind of shore up the linebacker situation, the secondary position, that's really our only thing stopping us, I think, from taking down the Ravens. I'm not worried about the Steelers next year. Not worried about the Bengals unless Joe comes back healthy, because that team's no joke either. I mean, I hope Burrow comes back. I'm just dancing all over this. Odds, I think, are very good. I think next year is the year. I think that, this season was a great success. And I think now that our window seems to be very much open, it's time to go. It's time to get the players we need at the positions that they're weak in, and it's time to go and really start, doing this thing. So I hope we're not going to come in as favorites because of Lamar Jackson and if Big Ben comes back. But we have a good. It's so up in the air right now. I can't even put a favorite team right now for next year.
It's the best
division.
And
I've never been able to say that.
It's the best division. I've never been able to say that. And it's the best division in football. I know everyone's been so high in about the NFC West. You get 3 AFC North teams in the playoffs this year, and I know that's because of the expanded format with 14 teams, 7 per conference this year. But all of those teams at points in the season were just dominant, and so this division is going to be.
I think it's the first time. Exactly. I think it's the first time in NFL history, I could be wrong, that 3 teams in a division had 11 or more wins.
I believe you're right about that.
It's good because we're going against some of the best teams 8 times a year, but it's also bad because we're going against some of the best teams possibly 8 times a year if the Bengals come back and they're good with Burrow. So, pros and cons, but yes, it is absolutely without question the best division in football.
All right, really quickly, I wanted to get your pick for Super Bowl 55. Bucks, Chiefs. Chiefs a 3-point favorite, 3.5 points depending on your line. Until someone knocks them off, I'm picking the Chiefs to win, but was curious about your thoughts about the big game at Raymond James Stadium in Tampa, Florida.
Mark, I was literally, before we got on the microphone, thinking about this in terms of, I'm not really a big gambler, but I love taking out bucks in the Super Bowl between the anthem and the prop bets and the whatever. That's the one day of the year I gamble. And this is the hardest decision ever because time and time again, he's proven it. You can never, ever bet against Tom Brady. Ever. Because, look, everyone's AFC, that division sucked, and you had Belichick. He goes to the NFC without Belichick, and now he's in the Super Bowl again in his first year in the NFC. It's unbelievable what this guy has done. But then you got Mahomes, who right now is on track, trending to being the most skilled quarterback we've ever seen play this sport. It's so hard. Brady is just old, reliable, old faithful. He's done it time and time again. Mahomes is legitimate cheat code. I have to go, and I'm going to regret this. I'm going to lose a bunch of money, I'm sure. I got to take the Chiefs. Well, shout out to your brother. They're their new biggest fan.
My brother lives in the Kansas City area now. And we'll see. I think we might be, if not for a D Ford's offsides penalty, you might be talking about a 3-peat with the Chiefs, because remember, Tom Brady and the Patriots, that was one of their last big wins before they went on to win the Super Bowl when he was still a member of the New England Patriots. But Kevin, this has been so much fun, and I think our listeners are going to love listening to this conversation. Where can our listeners find your work and listen to the Dawgs of War podcast?
No, thank you, man. I was looking forward to it. Really happy we could do it. Love the conversation. We are at DOW Podcast on Twitter. You can follow the meme account, which is the highest followed Browns meme account on Instagram now that Rawley runs, is at Angry Browns Fans. And then just a podcast. We're on all platforms. Dawgs of War, DAWGS. So yeah, thanks again for having me, man. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. For Kevin Tuleta, I'm Mark Bergin. Thank you for listening to the Browns Nation Station. Please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. And we'll see you next time. Take care. So long, everyone. And we'll see you then.